My husband opened the closet and went pale. His face drained of all color as if he had just seen a ghost. I asked, "What is it?" But I couldn't have prepared myself for the truth I was about to uncover. My name is Brooklyn Carter, and for 8 years I have been married to Axel. We built a quiet life together, the kind that looks steady from the outside. A home in the suburbs, long drives on weekends, dinners with neighbors. Nothing about it suggested the kind of chaos that was about to crash into us. We had our ups and downs, the usual arguments about bills or work stress, but never once did I think betrayal lived in the walls of our house. That night, Axel had been looking for an old jacket. I heard him open the closet door, shuffle around, and then stop. The silence stretched so long that I called out to him. When he didn't answer, I walked over. His hands were stiff at his sides, his face blank, almost hollow. I glanced down and saw a box on the floor, its lid half open as if he had pulled it out from the very back. Inside were letters tied with ribbon, a delicate necklace, and a stack of receipts folded neatly together. My stomach dropped. I had never seen these things in my life. I bent down, touched one of the envelopes, and felt Axel's eyes burning into me. "What is this, Brooklyn?" His voice was sharp, almost cutting. I shook my head, my throat dry. "I don't know. I've never seen this before." But he didn't move. He just stared at me like he was waiting for me to admit something. The silence between us was heavier than the air in that room. "I swear, Axel, I don't know where this came from," I said, my voice breaking. His jaw clenched. He didn't shout, but his disbelief was written across his face. To him, it didn't matter what I said. He had already decided I was lying. The box sat there between us like a wound torn open, spilling questions neither of us could answer. And in that moment, I felt something shift in my marriage, something I couldn't put back together, no matter how much I wanted to. After that night, Axel was not the same. He stopped looking at me the way he used to. His voice grew shorter, sharper, and colder. Every small thing I did seemed to set him off. At breakfast, he barely spoke. At night, he rolled away from me in bed as if I wasn't even there. The warmth that once lived in our home had drained out, leaving only suspicion behind. He would bring up the box again and again. "Tell me the truth, Brooklyn. Who gave you those letters? Where did you get the necklace?" His questions never stopped, and no matter how many times I told him I had no idea, he refused to believe me. It was like he had built a wall between us, and every word I spoke bounced back without reaching him. At first, I cried. I begged him to believe me, but the more I tried, the more certain he seemed that I was hiding something. So, I stopped defending myself and started paying closer attention to him instead. If he thought I was lying, then maybe he was the one with something to hide. I began looking through the receipts that had been in the box. One of them stood out. It was for a hotel room, paid under Axel's own name. The date was recent. My heart sank as I held it in my hands. I knew I hadn't been there, and suddenly, the pieces began to move in my head in a way I wished they wouldn't. I started checking his schedule against the dates on the receipts. Little gaps appeared, times when he said he was working late, but had no proof. I went through his jacket pockets and found another small receipt tucked away, this one for a restaurant I'd never been to. Each clue felt like a stone pressing down on my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. The items in the box, the jewelry, the notes, they didn't belong to me. They belonged to someone else. Someone Axel was spending time with. The sting of betrayal cut into me for the first time that night as I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out in front of me. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. If Axel wanted to play games, then I would learn the rules. Quietly, carefully, I decided I would keep digging until I knew everything. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The receipts burned in my hands every time I looked at them, proof of something I didn't want to face. One night after dinner, when Axel was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone, I walked over and placed the papers on the table in front of him. "Explain these," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. He barely glanced at them before looking up at me with narrowed eyes. "Where did you get those?" "They were in that box you pulled out of the closet." "Axel, they're in your name. Hotel rooms, dinners." "I wasn't there." "So who were you with?" Instead of answering, he leaned back and let out a humorless laugh. "You think this is funny, don't you? Planting fake receipts to try and trap me? That's low, Brooklyn." I froze, staring at him. "What? You think I made these up? You've been acting paranoid for weeks. Maybe you want to pick a fight, or maybe you want me to look like the bad guy. I don't know what's going on in your head, but I know those papers didn't come from." His tone was calm, almost too calm, like he had practiced the words before saying them. My chest tightened. He was twisting it all around, making me feel like the crazy one. "I didn't plan anything, Axel. They were hidden with letters and jewelry. You pulled the box out yourself," I said, my voice rising. He shook his head slowly, like he was disappointed in me. "You're seeing ghosts where there aren't any. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you're trying to stir up drama. But this is ridiculous." I felt the ground slipping under my feet. He was skilled at this, turning the spotlight on me, making me question myself. I wanted to scream, to shake him, but I forced myself to stay quiet. Fighting him in that moment would only make me look guilty. From then on, I watched him carefully. His excuses started piling up. Suddenly, he had to work late more often. Some nights he came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual. Other times he slipped his phone into his pocket the second I entered the room, his thumb moving fast to lock the screen. When I asked who he was texting, he would mutter something about work or a friend and change the subject. Even small things felt different. He guarded his laptop like it held state secrets. He would shower the second he got home, tossing his clothes into the hamper before I could notice anything. And always, there was that hard edge in his voice, as though I was the one who had broken something between us. I knew then that arguing with him wouldn't give me answers. He was too practiced at deflecting, too comfortable painting me as paranoid. If I wanted the truth, I would have to find it myself. So I began collecting my own proof. Quietly, carefully, I started keeping track of his movements. I wrote down the nights he claimed to be working. I checked his wallet when he left it lying around, slipping receipts into my pocket before he noticed. I paid attention to the numbers on his phone bill, memorizing the ones that showed up again and again. Every new detail I gathered was another crack in the picture of the man I thought I knew. It was painful, but it gave me strength too. Axel wanted me blind, confused, doubting myself. Instead, I was waking up, seeing him for who he really was. And I knew this was only the beginning. It was a Thursday night when Axel said he would be staying late at the office again. He kissed my cheek quickly on his way out, barely making eye contact, and grabbed his briefcase. I watched him pull out of the driveway, my stomach twisting. I no longer believed his stories, but I needed more than suspicion. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and leaving too. I kept a safe distance from his car, my hands tight on the wheel as I followed him through the city streets. My heart raced so hard I could feel it in my throat. A part of me wanted to turn around, to hide from whatever truth waited ahead. But another part, the stronger part, pushed me forward. Axel didn't go to the office. He drove straight to a little restaurant across town, the kind of cozy place with dim lights glowing in the windows. I parked down the street, my hands shaking as I watched him step out of his car. A moment later, a woman appeared from the sidewalk. She was younger, with long blonde hair that caught the glow of the street lamp. She smiled at him like she had been waiting all day for this. They went inside together. I sat frozen, staring through the windshield, until finally I forced myself to follow. I slipped through the door, choosing a table tucked in the corner where they wouldn't notice me. That's when I saw her clearly. Claire Mitchell. I knew the name because Axel had mentioned her before, saying she was new at his office. I had pictured her as just another co-worker, nothing more. But sitting there, watching the way she leaned in close to him, the way her hand brushed against his, I understood everything. They were laughing together, laughing in a way Axel hadn't laughed with me in a long time. His eyes lit up when she spoke, his shoulders relaxed, his whole body leaning toward her like she was the center of his world. And when she reached across the table and touched his hand, he didn't pull away. He laced his fingers with hers like it was the most natural thing in the... I felt like the air had been punched out of me. My chest hurt, my vision blurred. And for a moment I thought I might get sick right there. This was the man I had shared my life with for 8 years, the man I trusted, the man who swore he loved me. And here he was, giving pieces of himself to someone else. I wanted to march over, to throw the receipts and the letters in his face, to demand he explain himself with her sitting right there. But I didn't. Something inside me told me not to waste that moment on anger. He thought he was clever, that he had me fooled. Let him keep thinking that. I quietly left the restaurant before they could see me. The night air was cold against my skin, but my blood felt hotter than fire. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, but my mind was sharper than it had been in weeks. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg him to tell me the truth, or let him twist my words. No. If Axel wanted a war, he would get one. He had taken my trust and shattered it, but I still had something left, my strength. As I drove home alone, one thought kept repeating in my head. He had no idea what was coming. Axel came home close to midnight. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea when the door opened. He walked in, loosened his tie, and tossed his jacket onto the chair. The moment he leaned down to kiss my forehead, I smelled it, sweet perfume clinging to his shirt. It wasn't mine. The scent was heavy, almost mocking, and I knew exactly where it had come from. My anger rose so fast it nearly slipped out of me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand he tell me the truth. But instead, I forced myself to sit still. I looked at him the way I always did, as if nothing had changed. He gave me a half smile, the kind you give when you're already thinking about something else, and then went upstairs without another word. That was the night I decided to stop feeling powerless. If he wanted to play games, I would play smarter. I began to keep track of everything. When he left the room, I checked his bank statements and printed copies. I opened his email late at night and took photos of confirmations for hotel bookings. Every text that looked suspicious, I screenshot and stored in a hidden folder. Slowly, carefully, I built a file thicker than any story he could invent. I knew I couldn't face him yet. He would twist my words, turn the blame back on me, just like he always did. But with proof, real proof, he wouldn't be able to lie his way out. The thought of catching him with no escape gave me strength. Still, I understood that emotions alone wouldn't protect me. Betrayal was painful, yes, but it was also dangerous. Axel and I shared a house, money, and a future that was supposed to be ours. If I walked away with nothing, all those years would mean nothing too. That wasn't going to happen, so I reached out to someone I trusted, an old friend who worked as a lawyer. We met for coffee one afternoon, and I kept my voice steady as I explained everything without tears. She listened carefully, then told me what I needed to hear. There were ways to protect myself. Ways to make sure I wouldn't lose everything while Axel wasted himself on another woman. Her words were like a hand pulling me out of the water. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt sharp, focused, almost cold. Love had once blinded me, but now anger cleared my sight. On the drive home, I thought about Axel walking into our house every night, pretending nothing was wrong. I thought about that perfume, the way it clung to him like a secret he couldn't wash off. He thought he was untouchable. He thought I would cry and beg and break. But I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to break. Revenge wasn't just about making him feel the way I felt. It was about making sure he lost what he valued most. Not just me, but his comfort, his money, his standing, his pride. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my decision was made. Axel had chosen his path, and I would make sure he paid for it in every way possible. I planned it slowly, making sure every detail was perfect. Axel thought I was still blind, still believing his late-night stories, but I was already several steps ahead. I called his parents first, inviting them over for a small dinner. Then I reached out to a few of his closest friends, the ones he always wanted to impress. I kept my voice light, cheerful, as if it were nothing more than a casual gathering. Nobody suspected a thing. On the night of the dinner, I set the table with care. The house smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, the kind of meal that made people feel comfortable. Axel came home looking surprised to see his parents and friends already in the living room. He forced a smile and greeted everyone, but I noticed the stiffness in his movements, the way his eyes darted toward me as if trying to read my thoughts. The evening began smoothly. Laughter filled the air, glasses clinked, and for a while, it almost felt like old times. Axel relaxed, thinking it was nothing more than a family night. I let him believe it. I wanted him comfortable, unaware of the storm about to break over his head. Halfway through dinner, I stood up and cleared my throat. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady as I placed a folder on the table. Everyone grew quiet, their eyes following me. Axel frowned, shifting in his chair. "There's something I need to share," I said, my voice calm. "I've been keeping this to myself for too long, but I can't anymore." I opened the folder and laid out the receipts first. Hotel bookings under his name, restaurant bills, payments that didn't match his stories. Then came the printed messages, the ones filled with words no husband should ever write to another woman. Finally, the photos I had taken, proof of him and Claire together. The silence was heavy, broken only by Axel's sharp intake of breath. His face turned red as he leaned forward, his hands gripping the table. "Brooklyn, what the hell is this?" I didn't flinch. "The truth," I said simply. "Her name is Claire Mitchell. She works with you. You thought I wouldn't find out, but I did." Gasps rippled through the room. His mother covered her mouth with her hand. His father stared down at his plate, unable to look at him. His friends exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke up for him. No one defended him. Axel pushed back his chair with a screech, his voice rising. "You had no right." But he stopped when he realized nobody was on his side. The shame in the room was thick, and it wrapped around him like chains he couldn't break. With a furious glare at me, he stormed out of the house, the front door slamming so hard the walls shook. I stood there, my body trembling, but it wasn't from fear. For the first time in a long time, I felt strong. The power he had stolen from me with lies and secrets was back in my hands, and I wasn't letting it go again. Axel came back 2 days later. He didn't slam the door this time, didn't storm in with fire in his eyes. Instead, he walked into the kitchen quietly, his shoulders bent, his face pale. He sat down across from me like a man who had been hollowed out. "Brooklyn," he started, his voice low. "I made a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, let's work through this. We can fix it." I watched him closely, waiting for something genuine in his words, but all I heard was fear. He wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was sorry for being caught. His apology was nothing more than an attempt to cling to the life he had destroyed with his own hand. "No, Axel," I said firmly. You don't get to break everything and then ask me to pretend it never happened. For a moment, I saw anger flash in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He tried again, begging this time, promising he would change. I stood, turned my back to him, and walked out of the room. I was done listening. As the days passed, word spread. His family refused to defend him. His mother called me privately and said she couldn't believe what her son had done, that she stood behind me no matter what. His father, usually so stern and quiet, told Axel to leave the house until he figured himself out. His friends avoided him, ashamed to even be seen in his company. At work, things weren't any better for him. I didn't need to ask. I could tell from the way he carried himself. Once proud, once so confident, he now slouched into the house with dark circles under his eye. I overheard a call one night, muffled but clear enough. His co-workers were whispering behind his back. Claire's name was mentioned too. The affair was no longer a secret. And Claire herself? She slipped out of his life faster than I expected. When she realized he wasn't the man she thought he was, when she saw his family reject him, his reputation crumble, and his money no longer flow the same way, her sweet smiles disappeared. She stopped answering his calls. He came home one evening slamming cupboards and throwing his keys, muttering curses under his breath. I didn't ask. I already knew. Claire had abandoned him, the same way he had abandoned me. I watched him unravel piece by piece, but I didn't feel sorry. Every bit of pain he felt he had earned, and I wasn't finished. The next step was mine to take, and I took it without hesitation. I went to my lawyer friend again and filed for divorce. The papers were clear, direct, leaving no room for Axel to twist or manipulate. When I placed them in front of him, his face drained of color again, just like the night he opened that closet. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already did," I replied. He stared at the papers, his hands trembling, but I didn't flinch. Filing for divorce wasn't the end of my plan. It was only the beginning. He thought losing me would be his punishment, but I was going to make sure he lost much more. The day we stepped into the lawyer's office, I knew exactly what I wanted. Axel sat across from me, his tie loose, his eyes tired, trying to look calm. But his hands gave him away. They shook as he held a pen, waiting for the meeting to begin. I didn't bother looking at him for long. He had already taken too much from me. I wasn't going to let him take more. My lawyer spoke clearly, her voice steady, laying out every piece of evidence I had collected. The hotel receipts, the messages, the photos, all tied neatly together. She explained how Axel's behavior had damaged the marriage beyond repair, how he had spent money recklessly on someone who wasn't his wife. His carelessness was written in numbers, transactions that showed dinners, gifts, trips that I had never been part of. When Axel tried to interrupt, his lawyer placed a hand on his arm, signaling for him to stay quiet. He opened his mouth anyway, but his words stumbled. "Brooklyn, we can figure this out privately, can't we?" I didn't answer. My lawyer continued, stating what I was asking for: the house, a fair share of the savings, and control over the remaining assets. Axel's side tried to argue, but the evidence crushed them at every turn. His late nights, his lies, his trail of spending. It all painted the picture of a man who had betrayed his vows and thrown away stability for selfish desires. As the hours passed, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Every signature, every document, every acknowledgement from his lawyer that he had no ground to stand on. It was like bricks stacking back into place inside me. I wasn't powerless anymore. Axel, on the other hand, looked smaller with every page that slid across the table. His face flushed red, then pale, then red again. He muttered under his breath, glared at me when he thought no one noticed. But it didn't matter. His anger had no weight here. The agreement came down heavy on him. He would leave the house to me. Most of the shared savings would be mine. His reckless spending was his own burden now, and no one, not his family, not Claire, not his co-workers, was there to bail him out. When the final papers were signed, I stood and gathered my thing. Axel didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the table as though the life he once knew had slipped out from under him. In a way, it had. He hadn't only lost me, he had lost his standing, his pride, and the safety net he thought he would always have. Walking out of that office, the air felt different. The weight on my chest was lighter, replaced with something sharper, stronger. Revenge hadn't come through shouting or tears. It came through patience, proof, and the quiet strength to stand my ground. My lawyer walked beside me, her voice warm. "You got everything you deserved, Brooklyn." I nodded, holding my head high. Axel thought he could take from me without consequence. He thought he could play his games and walk away untouched. But now the balance had shifted. He was the one left empty-handed, and I was the one still standing. Claire was gone almost as quickly as she had appeared. Word spread fast that she had left Axel behind, moving on with someone new. It didn't surprise me. She had never wanted him for who he was, only for what he could give her. And now that he had nothing, she slipped away without looking back. Axel's life looked emptier each time I saw him. His parents spoke to me often but rarely mentioned him. His friends stopped inviting him anywhere. At work, people avoided his gaze. The man who once walked with his chest high and his voice loud now moved like a shadow, as if he didn't belong anywhere. One evening, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Axel stood there, his eyes tired and his clothes rumpled. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. He stepped inside slowly, like he was afraid I might slam the door on him. "Brooklyn," he said softly, "I've lost everything. Claire's gone. My family won't talk to me. I know I hurt you, but please can't we try again?" I studied him for a long time. There was no anger left in me, only clarity. I thought about all the nights I cried while he lied to my face, all the moments he made me feel small, all the times he twisted the truth until I questioned myself. Finally, I spoke the words I had carried inside me since the beginning. "The moment you opened that closet, I realized you weren't the man I thought I married. You buried us long before I dug for answers." He winced, as if the words cut deeper than anything else I could have said. For the first time, I saw him speechless. His mouth opened, but no excuses came out. He just stood there, broken, waiting for me to give him something I no longer had. "I'm not coming back, Axel," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." He lowered his head, his shoulders sinking even further. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the house. I closed the door behind him, and this time, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel weak. What I felt was finality. The story between us had ended, not with shouting, not with begging, but with truth. And the truth was simple. I was free, and he was alone. After Axel was gone, the house felt different. For the first time in months, there was peace inside those walls. No sharp words, no lies, no cold silences hanging in the air. It was just me, and that was enough. I started to fill the space with things that made me feel alive again. Fresh flowers on the table, music playing while I cooked, long walks in the evening when the sun dipped low. Little by little, I was building a new life. Work became a place of comfort too. I poured my energy into projects I had once put aside, and people began to notice. My boss praised me, and I found myself smiling more often at colleagues. For years, I had been Axel's wife first and myself second. Now, I was simply Brooklyn, and that was more than enough. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were still moments when I thought about the nights he didn't come home, the perfume on his shirt, the laughter he shared with someone else. The betrayal had cut me deeply, and the scar would always remain. But instead of letting it define me, I used it to remind myself of what I deserved, and what I would never accept again. The revenge had been necessary, but it wasn't what gave me peace. What gave me peace was knowing I had stood up for myself, that I hadn't let him leave me broken and powerless. I had taken back control, and in doing so, I had restored my own dignity. That was the real victory. I started saying yes to new experiences, trying out a pottery class, traveling to a nearby city on my own, even meeting new people without the heavy weight of the past pressing down on me. I realized I didn't need anyone to complete me. My strength, my independence, and my self-respect were more valuable than anything Axel had ever given me. Sometimes late at night, I would think back to the moment Axel first opened that closet. I could still see the way his face had gone pale, the way the box spilled secrets I hadn't known were there. Back then, I thought that moment would destroy me. I thought my marriage, my future, my very sense of self had ended in that instant. But standing where I am now, I see it differently. That closet didn't end me, it freed me. It pushed me to face the truth, to demand better, to find strength I didn't know I had. I thought the closet held secrets that would destroy me. Instead, it opened the door to my freedom.